Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Sports Daily College Basketball. Just going to fill out a bracket. Here's my official one. It'll be the one that I'll put into the Sports Daily Tournament Challenge group. And a lot of people are asking who I think can who I think can pull off upsets and stuff. So here we go. Just going to start and go through each matchup and see what I think. So obviously UConn is going to beat Stetson. Stetson is a really exciting player. Jalen Blackman, somebody to look out for when the transfer or when they get eliminated, and he will go in the transfer portal. He's bound to get a pretty big deal from wherever he goes up next. But that game will be on Brooklyn. Should be a pretty good Husky crowd there. So the next one we've got FAU and Northwestern. Should be a really good game. We've got Pooh Bowie, Brooks Barnheiser on Northwestern. They are a little short though. They're pretty banged up and injured. And then we've got FAU, the darlings of last year's tournament. Returned mostly the same team. You got Elijah Martin, Janelle Davis, Vlad Golden. I think the Owls get the job done here. But Northwestern should at least have a shot if Boo Buie can get going. Next little pod here, San Diego State and UAB. UAB, the winners of the American Conference, which FAU is in. They stole that bid. But the Aztecs, national runners-up from a year ago, are going to prove to be too much. Jadon Ledee, their big man, is as good as it gets, and there's only a couple in the country who can stop him, and the Blazers do not have somebody who can do that. Auburn-Yale, this is a really interesting one. Yale is one of the teams that returned the most minutes from a year ago. They did barely squeak by Brown in the Ivy League championship, but Auburn has typically beat up teams that have not had the athletes that they have, and there's very few teams that do that. So I'm going to go with Auburn here too. BYU Duquesne, this is a very interesting game because BYU is ranked as the top 5 seed, but all the 5 seeds are slated to play Friday and then Sunday if they win. BYU cannot play on Sundays for religious reasons, so they got bumped to a 6. And the committee that kind of had to happen. So the committee did give Duquesne, who would have been a 12, they bumped them up to the 11 so that they could still have the same caliber of opponent in the first round. And Duquesne's the Atlantic 10 winner, which happened on Sunday. This spot was clearly reserved for VCU. They ended up losing, which is why Duquesne is ranked worse than all of the 12 seeds and even some of the 13 seeds, because this was supposed to be VCU. It was supposed to be a 12 seed, and it ended up being Duquesne. So for that reason, I'm going BYU. They've been really impressive this year, and I think they get the job done here. Illinois, Morehead State, pressure's on. Brad Underwood has not made the Sweet 16 in his time at Illinois, and Morehead State coming out of the Ohio Valley, the first team to clinch their bid about a week and change ago now. They do have a couple of really good players to look out for. Jordan Lathon, Riley Minix can really cause some problems to other teams, but Illinois plays about as positionless as anyone. So I think that while Morehead State could be a popular upset pick, Illinois is not the team that I think that they can do it against. Morehead State played 3 Big Ten teams already this year. 2 of them were blowouts, and then the other one was a 1-point loss at Indiana. Next matchup, we've got Washington State and Drake here. Drake has made it a bunch of times over the years. Darian DeVries is their coach. He's an excellent one. He might not be there for very long, and his best player is his son, Tucker DeVries. And they were very close to beating Miami last year in this round of 64 game. They did. He had a terrible game, though. Tucker DeVries was something like 2 of 14 from the field or something like that. So I don't think that he's going to let that happen again. And I have Drake knocking off Washington State in the first round. Iowa State, South Dakota State. A lot of people thought Iowa State should have, been that last number 1 seed after their Big 12 tournament win, but the committee proves that they don't care about the conference tournaments. So they get this 2 seed here. They're not going to struggle with the Jackrabbits at all. The Big Sky Champs not as highly ranked as they usually are. They're going to get the job done here. Go down to this. Howard Wagner is going on right now. Wagner does have the lead just as the second half starts, but the Tar Heels are going to take care of business there. Should not be a problem for them as they've got sights set on, Phoenix, which is where the Final Four is. The next matchup here, Mississippi State and Michigan State, very interesting one. Both teams probably very overseeded. Tolu Smith is the player to watch out for Mississippi State here. He's one of the best fives in the country. And then Josh Hubbard, their guard, went shot for shot with the Kentucky guards when they played. And Michigan State here, I know a lot of people are going to fall into the trap of picking the Spartans in March because of their coach, Tom Izzo. But this team stinks. They do not have a center. They're not good offensively. And the only reason they're in the tournament is because of the name on their jersey. They're just not a very good team. Izzo knows it. They all know it. So for that reason, I have the Bulldogs moving on. St. Mary's and Grand Canyon, very interesting game here. St. Mary's finally dethroned Gonzaga in the WCC, just losing one game all-conference, and that was to the Zags. They're very good. Marshallonis, Mahaney, very, very typical Randy Bennett teams that play relatively slow and can rip you to shreds in the half court. And then we got Bryce Drew's Grand Canyon. The Antelopes, Lopes for short. They're a very popular upset pick, and there's really one reason why, and that's Tyon Grant Foster. He's their best player by a mile. Honorable mention, National All-American. So I think Grand Canyon out of the whack pulls the upset because of Tyon Grant Foster, and I think he's about to take this country by storm. Next, we got Alabama and Charleston. Pat Kelsey's done an excellent job with Charleston. As next year they'll be in the Atlantic 10, or that's not official yet, but it seems like that's what it's headed for. And Alabama Nate Oates and the Crimson Tide play a whole lot of offense and not a lot of defense. Those teams typically don't get tripped up in the first round when they're playing 13 seeds and up. You've seen a couple of 5 and 6 seeds lose to conference champions like Iowa, who lost to Richmond. Alabama is very similar to that team, but they're really good at offense. I have them moving on here. Another very interesting game in the round of 64. We've got Clemson and New Mexico. Clemson has limped into the tournament big time here. They did not end ACC play very strongly, and they lost to Boston College in the ACC tournament by almost 20. And New Mexico coming in red hot, winning the Mountain West tournament. Mountain West got very, very disrespected by the committee, and the Lobos are going to want to prove that they deserve better than an 11 seed. Bracket Matrix had them around an 8 or a 9, which just shows how off the committee was there. I've got the Bows winning. They've got a ton of good players. Donovan Dent, Jalen House, Nelly Jr. Joseph. These guys are bucky getters, and I think they get the job done over P.J. Hall and Clemson. Baylor Colgate. Colgate's been very close a couple of times over the years to pulling off this upset. They've scared a couple teams. They had a 14-point lead against Arkansas, but Baylor's going to prove too much offensively here. Nevada-Dayton, very interesting game here in the 7-10. This is another Mountain West team that's been incredibly disrespected. These matchups, or these seedings should have been flipped, in my opinion. Dayton had one win over the Field, and they did not win their A-10 conference tournament. And then Nevada played extremely well all year, beating other good Mountain West teams, and they won the Diamond Head Classic, which included a win over TCU, who the committee seemed to forget about that. So I'm going with the Wolfpack here. I think, Jared Lucas, their go-to guy down the stretch, is going to have that killer mentality to get a victory. Arizona and Long Beach State here. Long Beach State, the story's been pretty interesting what's happened there. We went over it on Sunday. Their coach was fired before the tournament, but he agreed to finish the season for the players, and they ended up winning the Big West tournament out there in California. So congrats to him, but unfortunately, it's coming to the end of the line because Tommy Lloyd and Arizona they need to win in March. They've had 2 unbelievable regular seasons and absolutely nothing to show for it. We go up here, Houston and Longwood. The Cougars are going to roll here. This game will not be close. Longwood has not seen a defense like Houston all year, and they are going to struggle to get to 50 points. Texas A&M and Nebraska here in the 8-9 game. This is an interesting one because there's a couple of players who can become March heroes in this game. You've got Keisei Tominaga on Nebraska, a little guard from Japan who can light it up really quickly if you let him get open. They've also got a very well-coached team by Fred Hoiberg, and Texas A&M's got Wade Taylor, Boots Radford, Buzz Williams. They never disappoint. Now, the underlying theme behind this game is the athletic director situation. They're paired up in both the women's and men's tournament, and the Nebraska AD has just gone to Texas A&M to take over for Ross Bjork, who went to Ohio State. So Nebraska will have some blood in the water here. I say on the men's side, they get the job done. Wisconsin and James Madison here in the 5-12. This is a very interesting game because the Dukes opened the season, for those who remember, with a victory at Michigan State, and they've only lost 3 games since, and 2 of those were to Appalachian State. So, the Dukes are a very good team. You got some high major transfers in there. Mark Byington's an excellent coach, likely to go to West Virginia when this tournament is over. And then you have Wisconsin, who've kind of turned their season around with a Big Ten tournament championship appearance. This is a very difficult one for me because both these teams are really good. I'm going to go with James Madison, though. I just think Wisconsin may have burned themselves out a little bit in the Big Ten tournament. Now, here we go to the 4-13 Duke-Vermont. This is, one of those games that the alarm bells are ringing in my head for because this Vermont team is very good. The style of play is very difficult to guard, and I don't think Duke can. Duke is soft. Everybody knows it. I think Vermont is going to go on to the next round. The way Duke, their best lineup on the floor is with Filipowski at the 5 and Mitchell at the 4. That's not going to overwhelm Vermont because that's a relatively small. Obviously, the Duke guards can go crazy, and Duke is likely going to win this game, but I think Vermont can pull off the upset behind some stellar guard play on their side from Shamir Bogues and TJ Long. So up next, we got Texas Tech and NC State. NC State has become, one of the darlings of the country with their 5 wins in 5 days run to the ACC Tournament Championship. They've got DJ Burns, one of the coolest players to watch in the country. They call him a refrigerator with ballerina feet. Nobody can guard him. He's a great passer when the doubles come, and I think Texas Tech will struggle to guard that. They haven't seen anybody like him. Kentucky, Oakland, a team that has stuck with a couple of good teams this year. They ended up actually beating Xavier on the road in the non-conference, but Kentucky is just rolling offensively. I see the Wildcats getting through there. Florida versus the play-in winner. This is obviously a very interesting game because they don't know their opponents just yet. This is one where I think I'm going to change my pick based on what happens in this play-in game. Florida had the tough injury to Micah Hanglotten in the SEC Championship, so that may have cost them a seed line. I'm going to go with Boise State or Colorado. Now, I hope it's Boise State because they're a much better team than Colorado, and I think they can get the job done against Florida. Marquette against Western Kentucky. The Hilltoppers, very unlucky to get a 15 seed. They could have been as high as a 13 probably, and they have a couple of high major guards. And the health of Tyler Kolek is definitely something to watch out for. They'll get through this no matter what, but that game could be a little bit closer than people think. Purdue against the play-in winner. The Boilers are going to get over the hump and beat a double-digit seed this year. That's been their Achilles heel now 3 years in a row, but I don't think Montana State or Grambling can give them anything that they can't handle. Yeah, the 8-9 game there is Utah State and TCU. We have got a couple of really good players here, Emmanuel Miller on TCU and Great Osabor on Utah State's side. This is really, really close to a pure toss-up, in my opinion. You've got Utah State, another Mountain West team that's severely underseeded. Some of the bracketologists who go on TV had Utah State as a 5 seed, and rarely do you see bracketologists 3 seeds off. And that's the committee didn't respect the Mountain West. No, definitely evident here. I'm going to go with the Aggies just because they had to. They got a little chip on their shoulder. Now here's one of the most interesting pods in all of the tournament. We've got Gonzaga against McNeese and Kansas against Samford. Now I'm doing this live, so the Kansas news is very well known. Kevin McCullough will not play in the NCAA tournament. Now, they did an excellent job of keeping this under wraps because if the committee knew of this before they seeded the field, they would have definitely been at least a 5. Expect Bill Self to get the job done against Samford. For Kansas there, even just with Hunter Dickinson, who's still a question mark with his shoulder. Samford's an excellent team, but I think with 4 days of preparation, Bill Self is going to get the job done against Samford's unique blitzkrieg-style defense. Now, Gonzaga-McNeese, this is a very interesting one. McNeese 31-3 on the year. Shahada Wells, excellent player, TCU transfer. And then they've got Will Wade, the former LSU coach. Gonzaga, very different style team this year. They don't have the NBA players that they typically do. Graham Ike is really good. Anton Watson is really good. I just don't think McNeese have the bodies to hang with some of the bigger Gonzaga ones. So I've got the Bulldogs moving on. Up next, South Carolina. One of the surprise teams of the year against Pac-12 tournament champions Oregon. They stole a bid. Dana Altman's finally got his team healthy, and they ended up sneaking their way into the dance. Lamont Paris has signed a contract extension at South Carolina amid links to some of the open jobs. I just think Oregon has already run their race. I think South Carolina wins. Michi Johnson, Colin Murray-Boyles, really good players. Now, Creighton and Akron here. We had Joe Meade predict Akron winning here as they ode to John Gross, who's their coach, the former Illinois coach. But Creighton's one of the teams who I think can go on a very deep run, and that'll start with a W against Akron. Now, Texas versus the play-in winner. This one will be tonight after Wagner and Howard. I really like Colorado State to beat Virginia, and then that sets up a really all-time round of 64 game, I think, between Dylan Dessou, Max Asmus, and Isaiah Stevens from Colorado State's side. Nico Medved, the coach for Colorado State, has a very, very complex offense, which is why I think they'll beat Virginia, and I think they will beat Texas here. Now, if they don't, I'm switching this to Texas, but that's the liberty of doing these, play-ins, not being a part of it. Tennessee against St. Peter's. The Peacocks are back in the dance after going to the Elite Eight 2 years ago. Despite finishing fifth in the MAC, they still won the tournament. Defensively, they're very good, top 100 team, but offensively, they're really going to struggle against Tennessee's, pretty stellar defense there. So I got the Vols moving on. All right, back up to the top here for the round of 32. UConn and FAU from Barclays Center in New York. FAU, remember they won the East Regional in Madison Square Garden last year, so maybe they have a little magic left. The New York Magic left? I don't think so. I think UConn moves on. The Huskies are a better, well-rounded team than they were a year ago, and they got to gut down the nuts last year, so high expectations for the Huskies here. San Diego State and Auburn. A very, very interesting one here. Jadon Ledee versus Janai Broome would be a really good potential matchup here. I've got Auburn moving on. I just think that they've typically taken care of teams that they're definitely better than, and I think they're definitely better than San Diego State. BYU versus Illinois. Very interesting game here in the Big 12. You got BYU, who are kind of positionless 5-out like Illinois. Typically, Illinois struggles when, they post scores beat them up, and they don't like to double. BYU doesn't have that, so Illinois moves on. Drake versus Iowa State. This game will be in Omaha, Nebraska, if it does happen, which is very interesting, very close to both schools. I'm going to roll with Drake, though. Tucker DeVries pulling off the upset against Iowa State, who feel wrongly that they got a 2 seed, but Drake is going to go on a run here. They're in Nebraska. Their fans will be there. They're very fun to watch. Now, North Carolina and Mississippi State. This could be a close game with Tolu Smith going shot for shot with Armando, but Harrison Ingram at the 4 provides a matchup problem. RJ Davis at the 1 provides a matchup problem. Josh Hubbard doesn't really check, so I've got the Tar Heels moving on here. Could be close, but Tar Heels should take care of business. Now we got the Lopes against the Crimson Tide. We have got, a very interesting game here. If it does happen, Ty and Grant Foster versus, the whole cast of characters from Alabama. I have got the Lopes moving on to the Sweet 16. New Mexico and Baylor. Richard Pitino versus Scott Drew. Baylor's got good players. New Mexico's got good players. I'm rolling with the Lobos, though, to move on to the Sweet 16. They're hooping right now, and Baylor has struggled at times defensively this year, so I think New Mexico pulls off the upset. Nevada, Arizona. Steve Alford's run comes to an end here. I think Arizona gets the job done. I want to see Caleb Love, Keshad Johnson, Umar Bala, Pele Larson. I want to see them go on a run because they are that good. Up to the round of 32 here, Houston and Nebraska. We've got 2 teams that are very good defensively. Nebraska can get hot, but Houston, I think Kelvin Sampson will get the job done here. Nebraska could pose some issues, and Texas A&M actually did play Houston already this year. which this is not supposed to happen when they make the bracket. So there's a little bit of a bracketing principle mistake from the committee here. Teams that have played during the season are not supposed to play before the Sweet 16. So if Texas A&M does beat Nebraska, they'll get a rematch against Houston where they lost by 4 at the Honda Center, which is the home of the Houston Rockets this year. That game was played in December. But Houston gets to the Sweet 16, in my opinion. They're just too good. James Madison in Vermont. Definitely not the matchup that the committee drew up here, but I think the Dukes keep on winning. They will not be shocked by Vermont's play style because they are also a mid-major, so Dukes moving on to the Sweet 16. NC State and Kentucky, two very fun teams to watch. I just think this is where NC State's run comes to an end with Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd, and co. in Lexington. We got Boise State against Marquette. We got Max Rice from Boise State, who's the coach's son. Could cause some damage for Marquette here, but if Tyler Kolek is not back by this game, then Marquette have something to worry about. But Golden Eagles moving on for me. Okay, we've got Purdue and Utah State. Purdue is going to get to the Sweet 16. Osobor maybe could cause a couple of issues for Zach Edey, but Edey typically fouls out the starting center on the other team. So if Osobor plays limited minutes, they're going to get cooked. So Gonzaga and Kansas here. I'm going to go with the Zags. I don't think Kansas can win 2 games with the lineup that they're throwing out there. Graham Ike will be able to have a game whether Hunter Dickinson is across the way or not. Anton Watson, Ryan Nembhard, those guys can get buckets, especially if Kevin McCullough, who's a great defender, is out. South Carolina and Creighton. Creighton's just rolling at this point. South Carolina has typically wilted when they faced bigger competition, 2 lopsided losses to Auburn. I think Creighton's a pretty similar team to that with their offense. I think Creighton moves on. Colorado State against Tennessee. Interesting game here. We've got the Vols, who are very deep with Dalton Knecht. I just don't think anybody can stop them until maybe the Sweet 16. So Tennessee moving on. And we got the Sweet 16, guys. I will we'll answer some questions at the end if there's some time, but throw those in the chat if you're listening. UConn and Auburn. Here's my first real wild card of the day. These teams played a 3-overtime game in Atlantis a couple years ago, and UConn won. Obviously, much different teams from then, but UConn has the bodies to do some damage, or Auburn has the bodies to throw at UConn. I think the Tigers pull off the upset here in the Sweet 16. We're going down to Illinois against Drake. I'm going to go with the Fighting Illini here. I think Drake's run will come to an end. Get a 4-day prep for the Fighting Illini. I think they'll take down Tucker DeVries and the Bulldogs. We have got North Carolina and Grand Canyon. Again, 4 days prep for the Tar Heels. They'll move on. New Mexico against Arizona. This is a very difficult one that I was thinking about a lot earlier. But I think, again, the Lobos are rolling. Caleb Love. Arizona doesn't have the depth that maybe some of the other 2 seeds have, and I think New Mexico gets to the Elite 8. Going up here to Houston and James Madison, the Dukes run is going to come to an end here. Houston is really good. They were 1 seed last year. They got knocked off in this game. Not going to happen this time around. Kentucky and Marquette. Kentucky has the firepower to beat them. They're going to win this game. Marquette is very good. Shaka has got those guys playing okay, especially considering Tyler Kolek has been out, but Kentucky is going to move on to the Elite 8. Purdue and Gonzaga. Interesting one here, and a big risk putting Gonzaga this far because they could lose to McNeese in the first round, but I have Mark Few scheming his way around Zach Edey and Purdue taking their L in the Sweet 16. Creighton and Tennessee. I've got the Jays here. I think when they're rolling, they're rolling. And Tennessee's offense late in games is typically give it to Knecht and get out of the way. I think Creighton can scheme enough around that. Creighton to the Elite 8. Okay. Auburn and Illinois. This will be an interesting one on 1 day's prep. I think Illinois moves on and beats the Tigers. Their positionless ball, dragging Janai Broom out of the paint, could cause a couple of issues. We've got North Carolina and New Mexico. This is where the end of the road comes for Richard Pitino and the Lobos. Carolina to the Final Four. Now I've got Houston and Kentucky. Kelvin Sampson against John Calipari. Typically, this is the point where Houston will have lost. They have elite defense, but once they face the elite of the elite offense, that's when it crumbles. More of the same here. Kentucky to the Final Four. Gonzaga and Creighton over here in the Elite Eight. This will be an interesting one if it happens. Obviously, Andrew Nembhard transfer from Creighton to Gonzaga to play where his brother played. I got the Jays going to the Final Four. So we got Illinois, North Carolina, and we have got Kentucky and Creighton. Really, really potential. 4 really good teams here, but not a lot of people have this Final Four. 3 seeds. Well, last year, UConn was the lowest rated seed, and there were 4 in the Final Four. So, Illinois, North Carolina. I got the Tar Heels moving on just because I think Harrison Ingram will be a huge matchup problem. Hawkins typically plays the 5. You might see a lot of Dane time in here from Danger on Illinois. I'm going to go with North Carolina. Creighton and Kentucky. I'm going with the Wildcats here. Their offense will get them across the line against Creighton, and the depth of the Jays can be exposed by Kentucky, who can run as much as 8 to 10 deep. Carolina, Kentucky, the all-blue blood battle in the championship. R.J. Davis, Armando Bacot, and the Tar Heels will be national champions, 82 to 78 for a total of 160. So thank you, everybody. That's my bracket. I hope I provided a couple of insight for you. I got a fantasy baseball draft here in a couple minutes. Just have 2 questions, though. We'll get to them real quick. How does McCullough being out affect Kansas? I don't think they can win more than 1 game now. They're light to begin with him, and now they are super light without him. And then the second question here is Houston all the way. Certainly could do it. They have the defense too, but like I said earlier, once you come to elite offense, typically that's when elite defense takes its step down. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this special edition of Sports Daily College Basketball. Here's my bracket. See if you can beat me in the group. Tournament challenge.